Our first session's title is Who is Guru Nanak? And our presenter today is Jaspreet Kaur. Jaspreet Kaur is from Toronto as well. You may notice she's also sitting in the same room as Santvir Singh, which is fantastic. And, I met Jaspreet through Sidak. And this is the thing that Sidak really helps us with, is these connections. I am sitting in Surrey, which is close to Vancouver, for those of you who don't know, and Jaspreet is all the way across the country in Toronto. And so this is this Sidak for us was an opportunity to connect and meet people all over the world. And in our case, just happens to be in the same country. But these are connections that have lasted for many, many years. And this is something that you will also experience when you come to Sidak as well. And I will turn this over to Jaspreet Kaur for her presentation.
Thank you so much. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you all so much for taking your morning to be with us and spend this time talking about Guru Nanak Dev Ji. I think that's such an incredible use of time. I'm so excited to share this. I think even reviewing this material, I feel like I fell in love with Guru Nanak Dev Ji all over again. My name is Jaspreet Kaur and my pronouns are she and her. And Santvir Singh and I are on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Mississaugas, which is currently known as the city of Toronto. And it's also currently home to a lot of First Nation, Métis, and Inuit folks. I am always in awe of what it means to be sovereign and to also be a settler, to be someone of the land, and to be on land that was colonized. So there's a really interesting challenge for us as Sikhs and as settlers on colonized land. And I invite you to reflect on that as well as we work through this. So for the next 30 minutes, we're going to look at Guru Nanak Dev Ji, Guru Nanak Sahib Maharaj, and talk about who he was and the contribution that he made to this world. We're going to understand the vision and personality of the Guru based on Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj and secondary sources. So when we look at secondary sources, we're going to look at by Nand Lal, we're going to look at by Gurdas Ji, we're going to look at not just any secondary sources, but secondary sources which are approved by the Panth and which we know have a long and historical connection to Guru Granth Sahib Ji. We are going to look at the stereotypes of Guru Nanak Dev Ji and address those stereotypes and get to know Guru Granth Sahib Ji, Guru Nanak Dev Ji, through the sources we have that are approved by the Gurus and by the Guru Panth as well. Okay, so my first question to you folks, what I want you to do is think about who is Guru Nanak Dev Ji to you. So when you think about, we have this famous Soba Singh painting where Guru Nanak Dev Ji is older, his eyes are kind of rolling into the back of his head. He's got this light coming out from behind him. Some folks there's some words that are up here on the screen. Some people think of him as someone who participated in capitalism. Some people think of him as a communist. Some people think of him as a pacifist. Some people think of him as a militant. Some people think of him as religious. Some people will think of him as political. And what I want you to do is, if you are familiar with the Jamboard, you can take a sticky note, or you can write, you can text, you can whatever. But put your word in there, hit save, and feel free to stick it on there. So we'll give a couple minutes, maybe 1 minute for that. Just what are some words that come to your mind when you think of Guru Nanak Dev Ji? We've got sovereign, definitely. Maybe I'll put one up there. Teacher, yes. We got leader, teacher. We'll do something. Oh, these are good ones. Oh, these are so beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to read some of them. If you have any last minute thoughts, you can put them in while I'm reading them. So we have that he was an illuminator, founder, a giver of light, a teacher, a leader, embodiment of God himself, storyteller, sovereign, revolutionary. Very, very beautiful. So Guru Nanak Dev Ji, we know Guru Nanak Dev Ji through multiple sources, as I mentioned. One of them is the first one we're going to stop at to think about how we know Guru Nanak Dev Ji is through his self-reflection. So the Guru's revealed Bani, and the other beautiful thing you're going to see through this is that the Guru Nanak transcended multiple bodies, so went over bodily forms. So we'll predominantly be talking about Nanak in that first body, but there's also some reflections in here about that come from Guru Angad Dev Ji, who also wrote as Nanak or was written about as Nanak. So this is Maru Mahalla Pehla, Koi Aakhe Putna, Ko Kahe Betala, Koi Aakhe Admi, Nanak Vichara. So some say I am a ghost, some say I'm a wandering spirit, some say I am a hapless man, Admi Nanak Vichara, Vicharaya. So these are what people say about me. Paya Divana Sahoka Nanak Baurana, Ho Harbin Avarna Jana Rahao. I'm a mad lover of the sovereign, and some will say Nanak is crazy. I know none other than the one light. So Nanak Baurana, they say he Bauragya, he's crazy. And people would look at this person. And I think this is really interesting because we have the gift of hindsight. We get to see Guru Nanak Dev Ji from 2023 looking back, and we get to see the complete journey. We get to see all 10 Nanaks. We get to see how Bani was bound. We get to see how the Panth was created in relationship to Bani. In the moment, I'm pretty sure there were a lot of other things that people thought about Guru Nanak Dev Ji. Not everyone was able to recognize him as being sovereign, as being part of that light. His dad thought he was lazy. People thought that he was bad at making money. If you know the Sajasoda story, people thought he would, fall asleep when he was supposed to be tending to animals. He was bad at school. He talked back to his teachers. There was a lot of, and just someone who went on these yatras and walked and was talking about Vaheguru in a way that other people hadn't before. Contemporaries of Guru Nanak Dev Ji didn't always understand him the way that we understand him now. So they might have said, he's a putna, he's a betala, he's vichara, he's borana, he's all of these things. And Guru Nanak Dev Ji accepts this in his self-reflection. He says, Baya borana, baya divana, I'm divana, I'm crazy. This is all I know. And this is my life. तो देवाना जानिए जापे देवाना होए एक ही साहिब बहरा दूजा अवर ना जाने कोई तो देवाना जानिए जा एकाकार कमाए हुक्म पछाने खसम का दूजी अवर सियाण पकाए तो देवाना जानिए जा साहिब तेरे प्यार मंदा जाने आपको अवर भला संसार. So that person is considered crazy. तो देवाना जानिए जा साहिब तेरे प्यार जिहदे साहिब दा प्यार ओदे विच आ Manda jane aapko, apne aap nu manda janda, thinks of himself as bad, avar pala sansar. So Guru Nanak Dev Ji even says to all those other people that are saying these things to him, like, you're crazy, you're wandering around. He says, yeah, I'm crazy because I love Vaheguru and I'm going to consider myself bad. And, tusi main nal change hain, you understand the world is good, but manda jane, I understand myself to be bad. So this is how there was a lot of humility and what Guru Nanak Dev Ji thought about himself. The other thing that I think is really important and will come up as we triangulate who Guru Nanak Dev Ji is through other sources. So as we understand him through Satta Balwand, as we understand him through Nandlal, as we understand him through Bhai Gurdas Ji, we really start to see that Guru Nanak Dev Ji was able to separate himself from his Bani. he was able to understand himself as a part of Vaheguru, separate as himself as a man. Okay. So what did Guru Nanak Dev Ji start? This is, so when we say like, Guru Arjan Dev Ji tells us about Guru Nanak Dev Ji, this is one of those really important points where we can see that relationship between the Nanaks. So Guru Arjan Sahib Ji kende ya, Baleo Charag Andereo Mahsab Kal Udri Ek Naam Dharam Pragat Sagal Har Pavan Mein Jan Nanak Gur Par Brahm. So Baleo Charag Andyar Mein. So a lamp was lit in the darkness, and it got rid of all of this ignorance, Ek Naam Dharam, and showed that one Naam. Pragat Sagal Har Pavan Mein Jan Nanak Gur Par Brahm. That one Guru Nanak, that one Par Brahm, was revealed in this entire world. What did Guru Nanak Dev Ji bring to us? And I think this is such a huge gift. And it was something that was unprecedented at that time, and is still something that is so massive and is so amazing to try and wrap your brain around, that I don't know that we're going to do it justice in the few moments that we talk about it. It's a lifelong meditation. So the first revelation in Guru Granth Sahib Ji, the beginning of everything that we do when we first open up that ang, is that concept of Ik Onkar. Ik Onkar, Ik meaning the one, single, unique, unparalleled. And it's referring to that force that is everywhere, that's all encompassing. It's the source of everything. It can't be seen, it can't be felt, and it's there for everyone. From Bani, we have this line, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it down, and then I'm going to ask for a minute of reflection, and then I'm going to ask for you to spend your life reflecting on this. But what we know about that Ik Onkar from Bhai Gurdas Ji's Vara. So Bhai Gurdas Ji was a contemporary of some of the Gurus, was the scribe of Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj, and they also wrote their Vara, which are an accompaniment to Guru Granth Sahib Ji. So they sit outside of Guru Granth Sahib Ji, but they are considered the key to Guru Granth Sahib. So an explanation of all the main metaphors, a breakdown of the main power structures, a description of things. Every Sikh should read Guru Granth Sahib Ji. And if you're looking for an accompaniment or a challenge or a summer project, I would say try and read one body of Bhai Gurdas Ji's Vara every day. And then you kind of apply it. It would be like a lens. It would be like if you took a certain lens to every Shabd in Guru Granth Sahib Ji, and you were able to understand it through what Bhai Gurdas Ji said. So consider the key to unlocking Guru Granth Sahib Ji. Bhai Gurdas Ji says, Nirankar akar hoy, ekankar apar sadaya. So Nirankar is someone or something that doesn't have a form. And then akar hoy. So that Nirankar becomes akar. It takes on a form. Nirankar akar hoy, ekankar apsadaya, and calls itself ekankar. So that Nirankar becomes akar and calls itself ekankar. Okay. And this is, if you think about everything that Ik Onkar is, this is trying to grasp that immense, the multitude that Vaheguru is, and that it was without form, and then it took on a form, and then it took on one form. So that multitude of the entire universe became Ek Onkar. And the second line, Ekankare Sabadaton. So Ek Onkar was released in the sound of word and sound. Onkar Akar Banayan. And it created that form, Onkar. I'm gobsmacked and baffled, and I don't completely understand it, and I don't think we ever can fully understand it. But that's so beautiful that Ek Onkar, through Shabad and through Ton, through word and melody and sound, Onkar Akar Banaya, that formless thing became that one form thing became that Onkar through the Sabaton. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just give us a minute and think about those lines. Think about, you can close your eyes. Hopefully your cameras are not on. No one's there with you. You can just think about this. But what does that mean? Something formless, taking form, taking one form, and that one form through sound becoming a God. And something to think about every time. I mean, we're supposed to read all of Guru Granth Sahib Ji, but if you get stuck on the Ik Onkar, that's okay. It's a really fantastic and amazing thing that you can get absorbed in. I want to spend some time talking about what comes at, if we can move past the Ik Onkar and talk about Mool Mantar. Mool Mantar has, so it's the mantar that is from that source. It's the original. It has that highest value. And I've also heard it described as the thesis of Guru Granth Sahib Ji, which I love. So if you remember, like learning how to write a hamburger paragraph or learning how to write a sentence when you were in school, you write something and then you explain it and then you come back to it. If you think about Ik Onkar, if you think about Mool Mantar as an expansion of that concept, and then if from there, Guru Granth Sahib Ji bursts into a multitude of love songs and verses and poetry that is an expansion of Ik Onkar and is an expansion of Mool Mantar. And then it culminates in that Mandavani at the end of Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj. So it's one complete thought, and it's one complete thought that bursts forward from Ik Onkar, and then the rest of Guru Granth Sahib Ji bursts forward from Mool Mantar. So we have Ik Onkar, which we talked about, Satnam. It's that identifier, that Nam is Sat, is true. Satnam Karta Purkh, Jira Purkh, it's the creator. Nirpao, without fear. Nirvaid, without enemy. Akal Murat, a timeless being. Ajuni, Jira Juna to Bharya, so without birth, without death. Isn't caught in that cycle. Ajuni Sapang, realized by itself. Gur Prasad, with realized through the grace of the Guru. And then there's, how do we actually take these and internalize them and turn them into action? Because Bani isn't just for us to marvel at and to read and to be moved by, it's ultimately to be turned into action. So these are some interpretations of that in action form. So Ik Onkar, evolve like the one. Satnam, recognize the eternal principles. Karta Purkh, cultivate creative action. Nirpao, display fearless behavior. Nirvaid, view no enemies. Akal Murat, perform timeless actions. Ajuni, rise above the consequences. Sapang, cultivate the original self. Gur Prasad, perceive the grace. Okay, so was Guru Nanak Dev Ji political or spiritual? We have a tendency, or I did at least, to, when I was growing up, it was very much like, here are the gurus that were militant, here are the gurus that were saints, here are the gurus that were soldiers, here are the gurus that were spiritual, here are the gurus that was political. And when we actually look to the sources of information we have about Guru Nanak Dev Ji, how do we know about Guru Nanak Dev Ji? The sources that we have, we understand that it is actually from the very first Nanak onwards, you'll see that both were there. So this from Kal says, Patal Puri Jaikar Tun, Kab Jan Kal Vikhanyo, Har Naam Rasak Nanak, Guru Raj Jog Te Manyo. So Kal says, even in the nether regions, Guru Nanak victory resounds. Guru Nanak, you are blessed with the all-pervasive identification. You enjoy both opinion and divinity. So what I'm going to ask you to do in that same link, because this has a really interesting concept in the Shabd, Haranam Rasaka Nanak Gur, Raj, Jog, Te Manyo. So I think everyone might have a different understanding of what Raj and Jog are. You might not know at all. You might have some understanding of what those words mean. If you go to that same link in the chat and you open up go to the top, you go to page 2. What I'm going to ask for are synonyms for Raj and Jog. So what is another word for Raj? And what's another word for Jog? I'll give you a minute. Because this is something we know from Bani. That Guru Nanak Dev Ji had both Raj and Jog. And one of the first things, and one of like the only conditions of being a Sikh is accepting Guru Granth Sahib Ji, believing in the Gurus, believing in Amrit, believing in Guru Granth Sahib Ji, if you look at the definition of a Sikh. So when things come out of Bani, facts, like that's, if they're saying Raj and Jog, we know that this is a source of truth for us. Raj, Jog, Te Manyo. And we know the parts, their Bani, the Bani that they revealed is at the end of Guru Granth Sahib Ji, and they are writing the praises of the Gurus. So that's another source. We know Guru Nanak Dev Ji through their self-reflection. We know them, we've already seen them so far through, we've seen Ik Onkar described through Pai Gurdas Ji's Vana. And now we're seeing Guru Nanak Dev Ji described through Kal the poet. So within Guru Granth Sahib Ji, we have people talking about Guru Nanak Dev Ji. Okay, we got some good answers here. So Raj and Jog can be meaty and beady. Raj is the right to rule, kingdom and spiritual connection. Beautiful. Raj is sovereignty, Jog is spirituality, and temporal and spiritual power. Beautiful. Absolutely right. So when we think about Guru Nanak Dev Ji, sometimes we go, if you think about that original painting we showed with the Soba Singh painting, that can become the image of Guru Nanak Dev Ji that's ingrained in our minds. That's not the picture of Guru Nanak Dev Ji that comes through Bani. The picture of Guru Nanak Dev Ji that comes through Bani is someone who is crazy and wandering, someone who is talking to the Siddhs and challenging them in dialogue, is someone who is, we'll talk about some of the iconography around being a sovereign, and someone who is both experiencing both that Raj and that Jog at the same time. If you think about the time that this was written, a Jogi would never have been a Raja. Those things would have been concepts that weren't really synonymous with each other. A Raja wouldn't have been a Jogi. And so to say that both of those existed in one being shows that he was both political and sovereign. So in terms of symbols, we have from Ramkali Ki War, we have the Ragis. So Satan Balwand were Ragis of Guru Arjan Dev Ji who sang the praises of the first 5 Gurus. So again, really cool, triangulating who Guru Nanak Dev Ji, he says, this is who I am. And then looking to other sources to see who he is. We have other sources within Guru Granth Sahib Ji, straight facts. If you're Sikh, you believe in Guru Granth Sahib Ji. So we have Satan Balwand who are talking about Guru Nanak Dev Ji as well as the other Gurus. And in that Bani, they say, so in Ramkali Ki War, they say, Nanak Raj Chalaya, such Kot Satani Neev De. So Nanak established this kingdom, this dominion, Sach Kot Satani Neev De. And the foundation of that was Sach, on truth. And in the rest of this Bani, you see so many very, very cool metaphors and symbols for what Guru Nanak Dev Ji was. So in Ramkali Ki War, they say, the next part is Lehne Tareun Shat Ser Kar Sifti Amrit Piv De Mat Gur Atam Dev Di Khadg Jor Parkaye Ji De. Khadg is a sword. So you see the sword show up in there. In this Bani, you see this, I've got it on my phone as well. You see canopies, you see chatar, you see takat. So when Sata is talking and Bhagwan are talking about Guru Nanak Dev Ji, they're talking about foundations, they're talking about takht, they're talking about a shatar. So we see like a chandoa on top of Guru Granth Sahib Ji, like that. We're talking about sitting on a takht. We're talking about a sword in front of them. So this isn't like Guru Nanak Dev Ji was this super spiritual guy, and then Guru Gobind Singh Ji came with the Khalsa and gave us weapons. We see weapons as early as Guru Nanak Dev Ji. We see that Khadg as early as Guru Angad Dev Ji. We see that Chatar, we see that Takat in these very early descriptions of Guru Nanak Dev Ji. And also in Guru Granth Sahib Ji, we have Kaljug Praman Nanak Guru Angad Amar Kahayo, Sri Guru Raj Abchal Atal Ad Purkh Firmayo. The permanent and unchangeable sovereign rule of the great Guru has been ordained by the primal being. And then there's Guru Nanak as the Guru. So Kalvich tu andar sa chadiya re paan. Amid pitch darkness in an ignorance era, he arose like an illuminated sun. Again, what sources do we have access to? We have access to Bhai Gurdas Ji, who is Pantha proved key to understanding Guru Granth Sahib Ji, and is also really, really important that he was a contemporary of Nanak 3 through 6. So he lived with the Gurus, was alongside the Gurus. In his life would have understood the living, like the memories of the first physical Nanak still would have been alive, and scribe of the original Guru Granth Sahib. And Bhai Gurdas Ji says, Jonkar Suraj Nikalya Tare Chape Ander Paloa. And that's, I think, that's a concept of Guru Nanak Dev Ji that I at least was comfortable with growing up. So this Jonkar Suraj Nikalya, as the sun came out, Tare, so the stars, Tare Chape Ander Paloa, that the Andera mit gaya, like the darkness was gone. But the second one is really cool because I think it's one that we're less likely to immediately associate with Guru Nanak Dev Ji if we fall prey to him as the Sobha Singh painting. Singh buke mirgavali pani jaina tirtaroa. With the roar of the lion, the flock of escaping deer cannot endure anymore. So yes, we think of Guru Nanak Dev Ji as the light in the darkness. Do we also think of him as that roaring lion? Because this is what we know him to be. Bhai Nandlal says that one's name is Nanak, the sovereign, is of the eternal nature. That one is like no other prophet or of that in the world. One of the things I think about is, what is it? The question is, why did Guru Nanak Dev Ji and then the Nanaks after him? So Guru Nanak Dev Ji had Pothiyan, and then we had Ad Granth, and then we had Guru Granth Sahib Ji was installed by Guru Gobind Singh Ji Maharaj. Why would they put words of themselves into Bani? If I were writing reflections, if I was writing an autobiography, in my autobiography, would I turn to Sant Veer Singh and say, hey, can you write some awesome stuff about me and I'll put that in my autobiography? That's not what this is. My experience is very human, is very rooted in Home. We know that Guru Nanak Dev Ji could understand themselves as sovereign, but we also know the Gurus understood themselves separately from Bani. Guru Arjan Dev Ji Maharaj would sleep under Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj. So would put the Guru Nanak Dev Ji would carry the Pothiyan with a lot of respect. The Bani was physically held higher than them. When Guru Granth Sahib Ji was installed, I mean, we have artist depictions of it, but we understand they were on top of the Guru's head, right? The Guru's physical body was sleeping under, Guru Arjan Dev Ji Maharaj's physical body would sleep under Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj. The Gurus understood that Bani to be higher than them and to be separate from them. So to put praise of themselves or biographical information about themselves into Guru Granth Sahib Ji, and to have other Panthak sources that are talking about them, and for the Panth to approve those sources and say we can turn to Bhai Gurdas Ji or to Bhai Nandlal, is not an act of home, but an act of security. It means that we have internal sources, and we need to turn to no other biographer to understand what Guru Nanak Dev Ji was. So the real Guru Nanak is Shabad wisdom, not the images that we know. Ek Onkar is the Sikh paradigm of that one force identification. And we've learned now through Guru Nanak Dev Ji's self-reflection, as well as triangulating from other sources, that Guru Nanak Dev Ji is that sovereign, the one with the Khadag, the one with the Shatra, the one with the Takht, the one with all of those implications of Raj and Jog. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that presentation, Jaspreet Kaur. You know, this is discussions on Guru Nanak Sahib is something that we really delve a lot deeper into at Sidak, but having gone to Sidak a number of times, once as a participant and many times as a coordinator and facilitator, I'm always in awe. And you know, these are presentations that I have heard a number of times, and yet every single time I hear something, I gain something a little more, a little deeper. And I think that speaks to that relearning, that going back, the different times in your life that you've come across some piece of learning, and it hits you differently. And so one of the really amazing things about Sidak is it lets you explore some of those things that perhaps like in your past growing up that you may have experienced, and yet we come back and we look at again, much like the painting of Soba saying, I know many of us have those paintings or prints of that, and so that kind of gives us a certain image, and really what we're looking at in our work and in our reflections is a way to reframe that and really get to who Guru Nanak really truly was. So we thank you for that presentation, Jaspreet Kaur.